right, we are live.
I think it's
Apologies
still
about that.
connecting, Jenny.
Um, are we all good, everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, there we are. Okay. So, we have Christian now. All right. So everyone is here. Quick intro again. I'm the moderator for this panel. My name is Jenny Ta, and I'm the founder and CEO of CoinLink and VC Network. A quick intro of our panelists today. Thomas Burrow, Chief Product Officer of Polymath. Alex Nascimento. Again, I apologize if I butcher any one of your names. Faculty and co-founder of blockchain at UCLA. Kyle Sonlin, founder partner of Security Token Group, CEO at Security Token Market, and Christian Kamir, managing partner at Sistany Capital. So our panel has about maybe less than about 45 minutes. So we're going to split into three separate parts. The first part is introduction. Second part is we'll dive into what is tokenization. Third part, we will dive further into the present and future of tokenization. Then finally, we will close it with a final summary or thoughts from everyone. So let's start with the introduction. Let's start with Kyle, then Alex, then Thomas, then Christian. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kyle Sonlin. I appreciate the intro there, Jenny. And I spend most of my time with Security Token Market. And Security Token Market, stomarket.com, is the largest data aggregator of security token transaction information. And we do that in a few different ways, but specifically in tracking secondary market transactions. So we're working with blockchain, on-chain explorers to be able to track the information and the assets as they move from private securities, as well as working directly with regulated exchanges, marketplaces, and ATSs and brokers all around the world to be able to source this information. So we compile and aggregate information from security tokens trading all around the world. We're up to, I guess, 65 now internationally, and with about a $700 million market cap here. And we do that, and we provide API support as well as market reports, analysis, research, and media through all of our different media brands to help drive adoption for the security token industry. So I'm really excited to be here, joined with some great guys on the panel that I think most of us have met before, and it's going to be a fun time.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. Next, Alex, go ahead.
Thanks, Jenny. Pleasure to be here with everyone. My name is Alex Nascimento. I started in this journey co-founding the UCLA Blockchain Lab, which then turned into Blockchain at UCLA, a 400 student plus organization that goes across campus. That's my academic hat. On my professional side, I manage 7cc blockchain investments. We do advisory and asset management. And then we've been in the journey of security tokens from the beginning before, there was even a security token. And shout out to Thomas and his full support to our educational efforts here and a sponsor of our book from the beginning. Thanks, Polymath.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Now, Thomas, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Alex, for the shout out. Thanks for the organizers. So I'm Thomas Burrell. I'm Chief Product Officer at Polymath. Obviously, very focused on security tokens. That's what the company is all about. The company was founded back in 2017, late 2017. I joined early 2018, and so we have as a company, we have that vision of a world where everyone has equal access to economic growth, and to execute on that vision. We believe that our mission is to automate and simplify regulated markets, and to do that, we're contributing to a dependable, compliance-focused blockchain that's called Polymesh. And as a result of our early involvement in the security token space, we've had the opportunity to work closely and engage with a variety of market participants. As a company, Early on, we started the work on the ERC 1400 standard, which is a security token standard on the Ethereum blockchain. That was before we decided to transition over to building our own chain, building a purpose-built blockchain for security tokens. So great to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation for the next 30, 45 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. Last but not least, Christian. Go ahead.
I summarize real quick since I just spoke. So I'm one of the managing partners here at Sustaining Capital. We are exclusively focused on blockchain-based solutions, including Web3. Blockchain is kind of a subset of Web3 in essence. I started writing a thesis on the decentralization of the World Wide Web in 2008. So we're following along these theses, and typically VCs will use this kind of as a synonym for a theme. For us, it's an actual academic approach. So we look at every startup as an experiment on these particular thesis ideas. So we have about 600-700 peer reviews on these ideas. There's an externality of that. We're now responsible for most of Harvard's fintech program, and also teach money technologies at several universities around the world. We engage with standards organization on the topic of what people call identity. It's actually something else from a legal perspective. And then also, and probably going to be the only person arguing here, security tokens won't exist for some time, if ever. Taking a very technical view on this. From a technologist perspective, the token's the peer-to-peer bearer instrument of a public blockchain, right? And if and when and where you attach PII to that, you just invalidate the herd immunity of that particular network, and you made it essentially the exact same thing as a database solution, which is the paradigm that we are disrupting right now. And yeah, we can get into that, but I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you, Christian. So now let's dive into the present and the future of tokenization. Due to time, if we can shorten so that we could get a lot of questions in. The first question is, what would be the simplest way you can explain about tokenization? And if you could give a few examples of what assets can be tokenized. Let's take the same circle. Kyle, Alex, Thomas, then Christian. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I really like where you're starting here, Jenny, and I think that this is a great place to kick off the conversation, because when we're talking about a lot of these technical concepts, it is important to make sure that our definitions are the same, that we're all kind of talking about the same things here, so that we can actually have a productive conversation about the technology as well as the financial instruments that underlie or underpin the technology. So when we're talking about tokenization, my personal definition or how I look at tokenization is that we're creating a digital representation of an analog asset. So when we're looking at an equity or when we're looking at real estate, we're creating a digital asset that is legally tied to that analog asset that then we can use for more efficient asset transfer. This allows us to leverage smart contracts to automate the compliance pieces there, and to more efficiently transfer the information of those investors and the compliance restrictions around individual jurisdictions, to be able to pre-program a lot of those things in to increase efficiencies, reduce costs, and increase the speed of transfer of assets internationally or within your local jurisdiction. So when we're talking about tokenization, I'm talking about creating that digital representation of the asset that is legally tied to the analog asset that can then be moved and transacted efficiently.
Alex?
Well, no, yeah, I think that Kyle did a great job at explaining it. Usually when we go into corporate education and we try to explain security tokens to financial executives that are not in the space, we utilize kind of the metaphor of like, you're getting a paper and pen investment contract, and an investment contract is any vehicle that contractually binds two or more parties into a financial transaction, right? With the expectation of profit on one side or on both sides. And if you're getting that folder and that paper contract and digitizing it and storing it in a decentralized database or a blockchain. And to Christian's point, I think that NASDAQ has been doing that for quite a while. So security tokens are out there for a while. It's just a digital representation of an investment contract.
Thank you, Alex. Thomas?
Yeah, just to continue right on what both Carl and Alex were saying, the way I would define it is essentially the next phase in the dematerialization of asset. It's a new way of dematerializing assets, and I think talking about a digital representation of the asset on the chain is one way to do this. The benefit of using that new method of dematerialization is that it comes with the ability to automate a lot of the functions that would otherwise be performed manually.
All right,
Thank you, Thomas. Christian?
So yeah,
I want to leave time to Christian. Go ahead, Christian.
As I mentioned, I was an engineer before I became a lawyer. No, I'm neither. But so one principle you need to differentiate very strictly about in a legal context is the difference between an asset and the right to an asset. So what I mean by that is only things that are digital native assets, such as a CryptoKitty, you can actually tokenize, quote unquote, right? And so anything else, you're using that term as a metaphor rather than as a technical term. I'll make a very simple example, and then you can see where the prerequisites fall from there. If I send you a Bitcoin expecting a CryptoKitty back in return, I can do everything as a smart contract, and then I can kind of transfer both of those in the digital world. If I send you a Bitcoin and expect a real world kitty, and my real world kitty doesn't arrive, I need to have the legal prerequisite to do enforcement in real life. So that all these prerequisites that follow then need to be built into adjacent to that smart contract system. So I can take it to my lawyer, can take it to court, and either enforce delivery or somehow get return back of this digital asset. So the point here being is what we constantly see is the conflation of these two concepts. You cannot conflate those. That's why it doesn't make sense to use that one token in the context of blockchains as a metaphor. You need to understand it as a technical implementation, because that is actually the main invention that the Bitcoin white paper introduced, and introduced the concept of the digital bearer instrument, which differentiates it from a database. And the blockchain is specifically not a way to store things. It's a specifically way to record things. And current blockchains most of the time have a lot of drawbacks, i.e. they are quote unquote public and have the transactions in a public form. That's not the point. The point is to transfer an asset from A to B. So that's the digital native asset and or the digitally native right, in essence, that you can then enforce. That's why it's important to not call things security tokens, etc., because it confuses people in terms of what you can actually achieve with that technology, which is something that you can't, right? You're missing all the necessary prerequisites in the real world at that point in time. The larger point, though, and that's an architectural design, is to realize the new network topology that's being built right now. That was what I was referring to earlier. Unfortunately, I had to talk about it real fast. We are reversing the current infrastructure of the World Wide Web, which is a top-down infrastructure from a bottom-up infrastructure, a world where you handle cryptographic primitives under owner control. You typically do not map them to blockchains, you map them to graphs, you use blockchains then to transfer that. So the metaphor that Nixabo introduced for that a long time ago is that of a digital vending machine. So in a digital vending machine, or in a vending machine, you put in your quarter, you can see that your Coke comes out, and you don't have to have trust, you can just observe these functions happening. In the digital world, you have a digital vending machine, and you need to fit out your digital vending machine with all these prerequisites, because in essence, for anything that is a right towards the real world, there are no peer-to-peer transactions, obviously. That's why they are not tokens. So the way this works from an architectural perspective, you approach a digital vending machine with all the prerequisites that you need to validate against this machine in order to deposit that right to that real-world asset there. So I'll facilitate it with my fiat identity. I leave that asset there. The next person comes by, deposits whatever digital currency is required, whatever validation for fiat identity, otherwise certification, authentication, verification is required, and then can pick up this digital asset there. It's a very important architectural component to understand, because 99% of current systems have been architected backwards.
Right.
This is why it helps very much that if you ever build a game environment, you build your avatar first. You build the avatar with the necessary slots to be able to then pick up your coins, pick up your sword, pick up any other things that you're creating for the digital world. 99% of all developments have been focused on the assets. The thing that's important for the time being when we are involved in all the development that they're making this happen to onboard quote unquote identity, which is the onboarding of agency and attribution to the new networks, which is cryptographic primitives under owner control, that are things like your biometrics, real world identity. This is being rolled out right now. So the next time you enter the United States, Homeland Security will scan your face, real world live ID. It's a cryptographic primitive on your enclave, on your phone, because it cannot be any other way. If and when and where you're still doing it the other way around, you're going to end up on our kill list. All the sins of the past that people are repeating will be invalidated, will have to be invalidated in order to secure this data. Because once something is entered as a copy into a database or the resemblance thereof in a blockchain-based solution, it is not viable. It will be invalidated. It will be copied, obviously. Anyway,
why do you need to make the I mean, I get there's absolutely a distinction between the underlying asset and a derivative. You certainly made that very clear, and I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. The question is why the representation of an underlying asset is not a security token. I think I fundamentally disagree with that.
Any token is a smart contract, is a standardized smart contract. It's always under development. If it's part of a public blockchain, the public blockchain is also under development, so it changes prerequisites. These are all individual contracts. You can try to classify them, but it's kind of the square peg to the round hole analogy, because they're constantly in flux. If and when and where you want to standardize those, sure, it has validity and it has some additional functionality, but ultimately
there we go. So we're in agreement.
It will larger point here being as that no one should be a custodian of PII. It's not necessarily about the assets, right?
Why not?
You cannot protect PII under your custody. Also, if you are subject to regulation, that's because you have custody of PII or you have custody of assets, because that's the protective mechanism that's built into the law.
Which needs to be.
I respectfully disagree, Christian. Let me give you a case point, and you tell me what you think. Right? We all build here a security token that's a representation of an investment contract that says, I'm going to lend you some cash and you're going to pay me 10% of it. I create a PDF file of that contract and store it together with that security token. How is that not legally binding?
That's not what I said. No, it's just not a token.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
You've created a token for it.
All right, gentlemen.
The question is always the same. Can I transfer it peer-to-peer without you? Or is it anchored to a platform? Do I need to do KYC to do it?
Yes, absolutely do.
If so, it's not a token, right?
I disagree. Yeah. So that's always where we've established our definitions. That's important.
So what is it if it's not a token then? How would you define it, Christian?
It's just another database entrance for all intents and purposes that is secured by a blockchain, because the crucial difference here
semantics.
That's no, it's actually very, very important, because blockchain technology predates the Bitcoin white paper by a decade. It's referenced in the second footnote, right? So that blockchain technology is a certain type of encryption. What makes a transaction immutable and what creates the facility of having a peer-to-peer bearer instrument is a decentralized.
You don't need immutability though with a security token, because the reality is that these things aren't immutable ledgers. We need the ability to retroactively make changes to the ledger based off of the demands of the underlying shareholders. So that's why I think that your definitions are not correct.
No, it's a technical definition. Again,
yes, and those don't apply in a security token context.
All right, so I'm going to intervene here.
Together.
We're going to beat on the dead horse. It's always good to agree to disagree. So let's move on. And because we only have about 15 minutes left, I'm going to switch around a little bit here. So instead of one question, all four of you going to answer it, I'm going to randomly pick 2 out of the 4 and answer one question. Therefore, we can have more questions in with different topics and different ideas. All right. So this next question, I am going to choose Kyle and Alex. If you both can answer these questions, please. At the present moment, like now, 2021, where do you believe we're at when it comes to tokenization of assets?
Kick us off, Alex.
Kyle, go ahead. Yeah, Kyle, go first.
Oh, sure. It's really early. I think that we've really, when you look at some of these exemptions, they really it's the beginning of a lot of them even being able to leverage these security tokens. I mean, you look at the financial service providers that are getting broker dealer licenses and ATS licenses and exchange licenses for security tokens. There's only been a handful that have been approved. That's only been in the last 12 months or so. So the financial infrastructure is so young here, as we've seen with these, most of the securities laws that we follow in the US here were around, we were established in the 1930s. And so it took us, 70, 80, 90 years to get where we are today. It's funny to think that, in 3, 4, 5 years, or I guess 2012 was the Jobs Act, even in a decade, that we would be anywhere near a mature financial market from this perspective. And I think that the stats back that up from the secondary side. We really only see about $100 or $700 million market cap right around now, and we're talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars of underlying assets. You've got maybe 100 trillion in global equities and much more than that in debt, and even in just real estate. Those three markets are $100 trillion markets plus individually. So, I mean, we're talking about a tiny fraction of this industry being leveraged for this. You're seeing some of this blockchain technology being used in test cases by banks, a lot of times in bonds, because bonds are still traded over the counter and still are leveraged pretty much manually in a way that we don't even use for equities anymore. So that's an industry that's really going to be transformed tremendously by leveraging a lot of these automated pieces. But I think it's incredibly early, and I don't think that there's a whole lot that you can argue to suggest otherwise.
Thank you, Kyle. Alex?
I think it's a very interesting aspect. And just to add on to what Kyle mentioned, what you're really trying to do here, and not to beat on the dead horse, but I don't think, calling it a token or calling it an apple or a fruit really matters. You can call it whatever you want to call it. The matter is what does it enable, right? And it enables issuers and investors to create a representation of an asset and distribute it on a platform like the internet, where previously you were physically blocked from reaching several investors. Because back in the day when I started working in the investment space, you had to get on a plane and put some paper and pen underneath your arm and go across the globe, try to sell an asset. Now you can, if you want to call it something different, Christian, be my guest, but you can tokenize it and distribute it across the globe.
And they're leveraged on Uniswap. I mean, we're seeing, if you're going to call some ERC20 tokens, we're seeing a lot of these tokens trading on a lot of the same platforms, which, again, I would use as probably strong bolstering evidence to suggest they are in fact tokens.
All righty. So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Both Alex and Kyle just answer a question about the present. Now I'm going to go to Thomas and Christian. Let's answer this question about the future, okay? So here is the question about the future. It has been said by a number of experts within the tokenization space that as soon as a Fortune 500 company starts to tokenize assets, then the blockchain industry will really start to grow and portfolios will start looking a little differently. Is tokenization the engine to the economy of the future? Why or why not? Why not? This is for Thomas and Christian. Thomas, I'll let you go first.
All right. So I suppose when looking at this question, the first thing that comes to mind for me is perhaps looking at the definition of what the profile of those Fortune 500 companies could be. And what I mean by that is if those are sort of publicly traded companies, the public markets are very efficient. And so the likelihood of them creating a security token for themselves is very low. But if we talk about some of the banks that are part of the Fortune 500, then I would completely agree with that statement, in the sense that at the moment, some of the larger banks, like we've seen quite a few issuing security tokens and doing issuances, starting with bonds and then moving into other assets. As those move in at scale, then the market will fundamentally shift, and so I would say, to go back to the original question, will the landscape fundamentally shift when a Fortune 500 company starts to tokenize? I would say yes, if that Fortune 500 is a bank. If it's an entity, I don't fundamentally believe that this is going to happen anytime soon, because of the how efficient the public rails are today. But for the second part of the question around, is tokenization the engine to the economy of the future? My answer to that would be absolutely. It's bringing material benefits, as we're seeing, from an automation and de-risking that lead to greater liquidity perspective. But we need to demonstrate that as an industry before we can make a claim on a larger part of the market.
Thank you, Thomas. Christian?
Yeah, so we are a lead investor in Provenance, and so they did the largest securitization of home loans last year since the financial crisis. We also have an investment in a Sukuk bond issuance platform. So we've been in that space for a very, very long time. So I think, yes, totally, like the principles will all apply. It's just like a lot of these developments right now kind of put the cart before the horse. I totally think that anything that's a physical right or a physical asset and a digital right will have a representation in the virtual world. It's just that at this particular stage, we unfortunately have focused on the wrong thing. So we have not focused on actually conveying the agency and attribution to the actual rights holder, because any asset only becomes an asset because you have an attribution to that owner, right? Because if you forget that you have your bank account, it might as well not exist. For a very simple example, if you have a house in the middle of nowhere and no one cares, then it's not an asset. What makes it an asset is it's the facility of that it's you that's associated to you, that you can take ownership of it, that you can enforce its legal right. So the larger point is that all of these things are legal technologies, right? So you need to always provide the prerequisites. A lot of the legal frameworks that we're having right now are being influenced by the changing technologies. So that's why technologies, and specifically decentralized software systems, are the solution to regulation, not the other way around. A lot of times, and that's the facility of, unfortunately, lawyers explaining this concept wrong, teams that we're seeing implementing the letter of the law rather than the purpose of the law. You can actually implement the purpose of the law perfectly using these tools, because they provide exactly what the laws and regulations are intending to do, which is provide security and safety to the investor and provide visibility into the transactions that are occurring, right? And so that's why it's very important to not design these systems towards the legacy regulation, but understand what the legacy regulation is trying to achieve, right?
All righty. Thank you, Christian. We have about 6 minutes, and I'm going to try to squeeze 2 more questions in for our listeners. This next one, I'm going to choose Alex and Thomas. So, Alex and Thomas, here is your question. As the former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers once said, the blockchain will massively disrupt financial products on Wall Street. Based upon the information you all have shared thus far, we can clearly see security tokens are the key to tapping a multi-trillion-dollar industry. If you were to sit across a Fortune 500 CEO, let's just say Elon Musk, what would be your elevator pitch for them to consider tokenization their company? Tokenizing their company, placing their company on the blockchain. Alex, go ahead and go first.
I think Tom lives a life of much closer to that experience than I do, but the leading polymath. But I'll say one thing. I think that my elevator pitch would be If in the entire United States you only have about 3,000 companies that pay dividends, that's an operating issue. And why is that? It's because it's so costly to operate in pen and paper. And then tokenization allows you to significantly reduce those costs. You would say that a bank the size of Goldman Sachs spends about maybe $10 billion a year on their back office. So if you tokenize, you can certainly offer a lot more products at a much more competitive rate. But I'll let Tom give a lot more thought.
Thank you, Alex. Thomas?
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Jenny. I'll actually take a slightly different approach. The approach there would be, why would you don't necessarily need to tokenize or consider tokenizing your entire company. Have you thought about taking a novel approach to funding new products that are being produced by your own organization? So essentially looking at different product lines as different business entities and creating and running them as essentially separate functions or separate groups within your own organization, and deciding how those will be funded based on the risk reward that you're willing to accept as a company. And so instead of perhaps considering tokenizing your entire company, have you considered looking at what your company is doing and tokenizing that?
Very interesting. Thank you, Thomas. We are now down to 3 minutes. So I'm going to try to squeeze this last question in for Kyle and Christian. If you guys both just take 1 minute each to answer this question, please. Then we have to go into the closing. So I think it's an easy one. So let's start with Kyle. Okay. So the question is for Kyle and Christian. In 1 minute, what are the pros and cons of tokenization?
Wow,
Kyle,
that's a
30
question for a
seconds
minute.
each. Yes,
Well,
1 minute.
So for me, for public company, I guess it's optimizing the compliance costs. It's leveraging smart contracts to improve the efficiencies of managing a cap table, right? Being able to have full transparency of the owners of your underlying asset, to be able to see them and engage with them, which I think is something that's severely underserved in the public markets. It also increases the global opportunity of investment. This is what a public company is looking to do: raise capital. So when you're raising capital, you're going to be able to raise from a whole lot more people internationally than you could be able to do that in the public markets from just the US or just from segmented regional jurisdictions. So those are the benefits. The costs are that it's a severely underdeveloped market. It's way too early for a public company to be able to leverage that efficiently. Coinbase explored it and came to the same conclusion. And I also think that we're still trying to figure out the exact best solutions for transactions, because you look at something like Ethereum, which is the leader from a tokenization perspective, and gas fees are just way too high to make this thing practical. So we're still trying to figure out some of the institutional rails that are actually going to be able to allow high volume, high frequency trading, which is something that's needed to find proper price transparency and allow these markets to function in a competitive and efficient manner.
Perfect.
Christian?
Thank you, Kyle. Christian, 1 minute. 1 minute, Christian.
Well, so yeah, you cannot tokenize anything that's not digitally native. You can only tokenize the rights to that asset in the limited form, if and when and where you actually have 100% control over that, which most of the time is not the case, but it provides a lot of efficiencies if you take out a certain chunk of that, i.e. the obvious example that I've been making for 3 years now, just start tokenizing, creating NFTs of all your shipping documents, right? So any shipping documents, if you look at supply chain financing, should already be an NFT. Right, so that's an asset that you can use to build other assets on top, because you need the stack, right? If I create a supply chain financing documentation, I have this huge stack that right now I need to scan and spend 47 man hours on digitizing, putting into the right format. It's all about applying the already existing standards to this new paradigm.
Thank you, Christian. All right, we're going to go slightly 60 seconds over time. But let's go to our closing statement, and here's what it is. If each of you can just give our listener one simple sentence of today's panel and end it with your social media like Twitter. So where can they reach you? So let's start with Alex. one sentence, and your social media tag, please.
My one sentence would be that security tokens are probably the beacon for revolutionizing financial systems. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Just type in Alex Nascimento, UCLA. I'm the black and white picture there.
Perfect. Thank you. Kyle, one
Security
sentence.
tokens are the very fascinating intersection between traditional capital markets and digitally native revolution of financial systems. And so it's a great conversation that's going to get plenty of pushback from both sides. And you can find me at Twitter at Kyle Sonlin. First name, last name shouldn't be hard to find.
Thank you, Kyle. Thomas?
Security tokens are the vehicle to enable diversification, investment diversification for asset managers, and you can find me on Twitter at Thomas_Borrell. So first name _ last name.
Thank you, Thomas. Finally, Christian, one sentence, please.
Yeah, if you're still running an account-based database-driven system, be afraid, be very afraid. Change it. Do not keep custody of personal identifiable data.
And where can people find you on social media?
Just Google me. I write for Forbes, and I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find.
Gotcha. And that's a wrap for the first panel for today. Thank you, Alex, Kyle, Thomas, and Christian. Thank you to all of our listeners. We apologize we ran out of time for any Q&As, but you do have their social media that you can reach them directly. Thank you so much. And now we're going to quickly go into track number 2. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good morning everywhere around the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.